This is the Transcend in Life podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson, taking you from fear to freedom.
Welcome back to Transcend in Life, guys. I am so excited. A good friend of mine has stopped by today. He is wildly talented and very gifted. He's just an amazing man. Don Spini is a nationally recognized speaker and author of the #1 best-selling book, 60 Seconds to Yes. Don's true passion is helping sales professionals achieve their dreams and aspirations. This desire was the impetus to Don conducting over 150 full-day workshops from 2010 to 2014, making him one of the most prolific sales trainers in the country. Today, Don is the Chief Sales Officer at Appreciation Financial, a national financial service company dedicated to serving teachers, public employees, and their families and friends. Truly one of the best speakers I've ever seen and an even better guy. Good morning, brother. Thanks for being here.
Hey, JM, thanks for having me, my man. It's an honor to be on here. I've been watching and listening to these for the past few weeks, and they are amazing. What a gift for all of us. I appreciate it.
Well, it's the guests that make the show, brother, and I know you're going to knock this one out of the park. If you could, you have a really unique background. I mean, you have really done a wide variety, from being a police officer to a nationally recognized speaker, chief sales officer, leadership. Can you give us maybe kind of the story to how you got to where you are today? Because it's certainly unique, brother. You have faced some amazing adversity through your life and you just overcome and thrive in it. So can you kind of give everybody an idea of what your story is?
Yeah, sure. So what most people don't know, it's always easy to talk about and to document and articulate the achievements people have done. I have no shame at all in telling people that I had failed for the first 10 adult years of my life in pretty much every category. I wanted to be in sales. I wanted to be a business person. And, for some reason, it didn't work for me. And I, like so many people, just thought that the spark of luck did not land on my shoulder. I thought that it just had to be something that you just were gifted or just came from somewhere. And so the whole police officer angle came from me just failing in business and the private sector. I thought, I've got to go get a job. I've got to go make some money. I need some benefits. I need a pension. And so I looked into becoming a police officer, and I went through the full academy and became an LAPD reserve officer. And I'd done that for about 2,000 hours for free, and still failing in business, decided to lateral over full time. So, and people think, well, why would you want to go be a police officer? I mean, it only paid at the time $45,000, but I'll tell you, $45,000 a year to me was all the money in the world. I probably didn't make much more than that in 10 years in business. So in my early 30s, I was going to go work for the government. And, it was a steady job. It had great benefits. And, say what you want about law enforcement. I was looking at it from the perspective of having some security, which I had not had in 10 years. I had a kid, I had a wife, and I needed something. And, it took then it had an epiphany moment. It took an epiphany moment for me to get back and to pull out of the public sector and come back into business in 1995. So, through a lot of hard choices, pain, and adversity, I came back into business, but I came in it with a different perspective. And that to me is everything, because from 1995 until 2009, when I in effect retired from the business world, I had an amazing run, but it took a quick mindset change that I think could happen for anybody. And luckily it happened to me, and I got to see something that drastically changed my life.
So you've had a couple of those formidable moments in your life that just reshape anyone. And you said everything's, nothing's off limits. And your story, brother, if you're willing to share it with this audience of your growing up, I mean, it truly, I don't cry a lot, but this one, I don't think there's a dry eye. And I don't know if you're willing to share that, but it's truly remarkable to see what you came through and to where you achieved. So I don't know if you're willing to share that one, because that was obviously a big, big turning moment. And then you had several others. As you wrote the book, you talk about that as well. So I guess it's an open-ended question saying, I think it's remarkable. I think people can gain so much from what you have overcome. So I'd love for you to share as much as you're willing to.
Absolutely. And what JM is referencing is my childhood. So at 5 years old, we had a house fire, and I had 4 sisters die in a house fire when I was in kindergarten. And I look back and JM being a dad, me being a dad, I was 5 years old, so I had a different perspective on it. But from a parental perspective, how my folks recovered from that, I mean, they never recovered, but how they were able to carry on past that. Here's what was interesting from my perspective, even though I was 5 years old. And it's sort of a little bit of a ghost story, if you would just bear with me for a second, because people want to know, is there something past all of this? Is there a reason for all this? Is there life after death? And let me tell you, from my perspective as a 5-year-old, and why I really believe that I was saved for a reason. And maybe that reason is where I am today. But the night of that fire, I remember it like it was yesterday, even though I was only 5 years old. But when you have a traumatic experience, you tend to remember those, even though you're a very young child. I remember waking up, and I had my own bedroom downstairs as a 5-year-old boy. My brother was going to join me in that bedroom, but he was too little. He was in the crib in my mom and dad's room, and my sister's rooms were upstairs. And yes, this is a very tragic story, but I want to make sure I get this point across. I remember waking up and seeing my sisters all around my mom inside the kitchen downstairs. Now, what makes that unusual is I didn't know there was a problem. I just woke up to the light in the kitchen and saw my mom and saw my sisters all around her. My oldest sister, who's still alive, was at a high school dance, so she wasn't in the house. My baby brother is in my mom and dad's room. But I remember getting up and following my mom down the hallway towards her and my dad's room, the master bedroom. And then all of a sudden I was overcome with smoke, and I lost my mom in the smoke, and I lost my sisters in the smoke. And I went inside my mom and dad's room, and I just collapsed on the bed. I was 5 years old, and I was having smoke inhalation. I couldn't breathe. And something or someone grabbed me and pushed me to the front door. So at 5 years old, I don't know how I made it out of the house. I don't remember anybody helping me, but something helped me. Somebody helped me. Next thing I know, I'm in the front seat of the car, the station wagon, sitting on the street, and I'm looking at the house. And the house is engulfed in flames. And in the seat next to me is my little brother in a blanket. And in the back seat, and people get freaked out when I said, just bear with me. In the back seat were my sisters, all 4 of them. And we're all safe. I'm thinking, this is great. My sisters say, we're tired. We're going back to bed. They get out of the car and go back into the house. Now, I'm 5 years old. This is just what I see. We had no religious background. I don't think we went to church 3 or 4 times my whole life. I didn't know about heaven and hell. I didn't know about any of that stuff. It was never taught. We were just a family trying to survive back in the 60s. Well, the night goes on and the days goes on, and I'm shuttled down to a friend's house. I'm staying there. I haven't seen my sisters, my mom, my dad. They're keeping me from everything. And I remember the chief of police, Harold Barnum, a big, bald, scary man, but he was a friend of the family's. I remember him coming to talk to me that night. I'm telling him the same story I'm telling you, JM. And he turned ashen white. He's like, what do you mean? The girls are out of the house? I go, yeah, they were in the car with me. I still did not know a week later that my sisters had passed. And I was invited over to finally see my mom and dad after a week. My oldest sister was somewhere else. My baby brother was with my mom and dad. And I went over to a house, and they were having the wake. And people were all dressed in black, and there was a lot of people. And I'm 5 years old. I'm confused. I'm like, I go up to my mom. I go, hey, where's my sisters? And she could not keep it together. But she told me, well, son, they're in heaven. I'm like, I was so confused. It's like, I caused quite a stir. I caused quite a problem for my family because I told the chief of police that I saw my sisters alive. Well, guess what? They were never alive. They died of smoke inhalation in their bed. They never left the house. But to me, that as a small boy, and somebody today that's very spiritual, I'm not very religious, but I'm very spiritual. To me, that tells me there is much more past this life than any of us could ever imagine. It was exposed to me as 5 years old without knowing I'm supposed to know there's a heaven, that I'm supposed to know there's an afterlife. It was exposed to me. I saw it at 5 years old as plain as day. Those girls never left the house, but they were surrounding my mom in the kitchen. They were already dead. They were with me in the back seat. You know what they said? We're fine. We're going to bed. And I remember dreaming about them several times after the fire. And the dreams were always about them telling me how they're great. Everything is fine. They're having so much fun. Life is so good. I mean, it was, again, I still was not aware of religion or heaven or hell or that there's an afterlife, but the dreams were so vivid. And I remember them, this is kind of morbid, but they even said, come on, just, you can even lay in our coffin for a second. They let me lay in their coffin and it was fine. I didn't feel any weird, anything strange about that. Well, fast forward that to today. I always believe that I was spared because 2 days before that fire, I was up in that exact same bedroom where the girls were. The only reason I was downstairs, JM, is that my parents decided they're going to build a boys' room, and there was a little sewing room down off the kitchen, and they were going to move. They moved me down there, and you know what? I was terrified. I'd never slept alone in my life. I was 5 years old, but they're getting the boys' room ready, and it was just me now because, again, my brother was too little. I was terrified. I slept with the light on for the 2 nights before the fire, and I just wanted to be up there in that room where I'd been, my whole life with my sisters. Had the, again, coincidence, the miracle of me not being down there and my sister not being at the dance and my brother not being in there. The 3 of us are left are here out of happenstance, out of what I call a miracle. If you don't believe in miracles, my gosh, I've got so much evidence that they are true and they exist. But for the people that doubt if there's something past this, I'm telling you, there's definitely something past this. And I think it has a lot to do with how we live our life while we're here.
Guys, I've known Don. It had been at least 10 years before I ever heard that story. My point in telling you that is no one would blame you if you became a cynical asshole because this awful thing happened to you. But that's not him at all. He is absolutely one of the most positive, he just contagious human beings to be around. So I'm at a training and he's telling the story and I'm like, how is this 10 years? I'd never heard this. And I guess what is so amazing to me is, again, you took it and decided that I'm not going to be a victim. It's awful. It's sad. And you said, hey, look, it'd be pretty tough to out-sadden my story, but it's not a competition. And you just has shaped your life. So, and not to totally change the subject, but you had another just epiphany before you wrote 60 Seconds to Yes. And I think it's so cool because, again, you're walking through a store and this thing happens and it takes you down this amazing path to where you are today. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. And I think, again, to further the point that, if you have the right mindset and the right energy, things just appear before you. So yeah, JM, I'm in this grocery store. I quit and I'm out of sales. I joined LAPD. I'm going full time. They accepted my package. I'm going to be on the streets of South Central LA. And to me, that sounded way better than sales. At that time in LA, it was, the gangs were at their all time high, but that still sounded better to me than going into sales. And I'm in the grocery store in my hometown, the town I lived at the time. And this is so strange. I'm sitting there thinking about my life. People that know me at the time, I wasn't a reflective person. I wasn't deep. I was just trying to earn a living. And so why I'm sitting in a grocery store reflecting on my life, I do not know. Remember, this is part of the thing. Why I was doing it, I have no idea. I don't think I remember sitting around reflecting on my life for the whole 10 years I was an adult at that time, or 13 years as an adult. But I'm watching people, and I'm thinking about getting out of sales, and I'm asking myself, am I really going to go be a full-time police officer? I love being a reserve. It was fine. And I was watching people come down an aisle, and I don't know why I was staring at them. In fact, probably kind of a little bit creepy today, seeing some weirdo staring at you coming down the aisle. But for some reason, I had the whereabouts to see that these people did the same thing I did at the exact same place in that aisle. I'm wondering why. Wasn't that weird? These people were just like me. That I did that. I remember I did that exact same thing, and then I watched them do the exact same thing. So how I was aware of that, I truly believe it was divine intervention, because I think after struggling for 10 years and having the right intention, but not having the right vehicle, not knowing really what to do, I believe that God said to me, look, idiot, just pay attention for 5 seconds down this aisle. That's what it felt like, because I was so clear and so conscious of what they were doing. And the epiphany moment that James is referring to that led to a massive amount of success and then eventually led to the book 60 Seconds to Yes and the training is I discovered that all the time I was failing, I was just trying to be a great salesperson by studying great salespeople and all these methods and techniques and all this weird stuff that made me feel uncomfortable. But what I learned then, and again, it wasn't crystal clear as it is now. It's taken me 20 years to fully develop it. But what I learned is that every human being is totally different and unique. And I'm not slow. I know you all know that the human beings are all unique, but stay with me. We're all unique. We're all different shapes and colors and sizes, beautiful. We have different cultures. And that's what makes the world so great. And that's what makes human beings so great, is that I could be in a cafe in Europe and I could see JM, and I know out of 7.5 billion people, that's him. I joke, no other animal can do that. A cow can't do that. Like, is that Mary? Kind of brown, white spot. Only human beings out of 7.5 billion can recognize their friends anywhere in the world. So we are the only species that is that unique. But here's the key. Every human being has only two things in common. And me not knowing these two things is why I failed for 10 years in business. One is we're all the same species. Now, I know Captain Obvious here, Don. No wonder you struggled. You didn't know humans were all the same species? Well, here's why that's important and why I didn't understand at the time. Animals of the same species tend to do things in a similar fashion. Like that shark of that species, they all hunt the exact same way. And that chicken of that species, they all lay eggs the same way. Well, it led me to the second thing we all have in common. So we're all the same species. And the second thing, and this is the epiphany moment. And until I realized this, if I never realized this, I would have failed and been a government employee the rest of my life. Nothing wrong with being a government employee, but that's the path I was going down, the path of just pure security, which is fine, but that's not really where I wanted to be. The second thing we all have in common is every human being listening to this podcast, every human being in your city, state, county, country, every human being on this planet makes decisions the exact same way. And when I say that in a room, Jay, you should just see the wave of skepticism just roll to the front. Nobody believes that. No, I'm way different than my wife or my husband. No, Don, I don't believe it. And so I say to people in my training, I've done this from 10,000 people, and you just feel the room just go quiet and dead, and just, again, that wave of skepticism roll to the front. Folks, there's a reason we all make decisions the same way. And not knowing that is the reason why most people fail in sales, because they don't respect what I call the decision process. There's no fancy name for it. And I invest significant time in trainings and online and in the book. I invest significant time proving that. In a training class, 15 minutes later after I say that, everybody is nodding their head saying, oh my gosh, you're totally right. And then I make this statement. And by the way, those of you listening to this haven't been to my training, you don't know that. You're probably still skeptical like everybody else, which I would totally that seems reasonable. But let me just ask you a question. If it is true, if I'm right, if I'm right that every human being makes decisions the exact same way, do you think it'd be important to know that process if you're in sales or in business, you're trying to influence people? It's absolutely everything to know that. You see, I'll nail it down here, JM. This process is natural in all of us. And what I was taught in sales all those years I was failing, I was taught how to sell. And what I didn't realize is that selling is unnatural. And if I tried to apply an unnatural process to the natural decision-making process of other people, that causes their defenses to naturally go up. And when their defenses went up, they would tell me no. They could want the product or service. They could have needed it desperately, but I was driving them away because I was selling instead of respecting the natural decision process. So that's what prompted 60 Seconds Yes. That's what brought me over to you guys, and it's just been fun ever since, because I love training people to see that process and how to affect it. And once you know how to affect it, you're guaranteed to be successful in sales or in business, because sales is it's just one of the many things that you need to be successful, because the real skill is to influence people, to get them over fear of change, and to get them to do right, and to get them to do things they don't want to do so they can have what they want to have. That's the ultimate skill, I think, in business and in sales. And you and I deal with that every day, JM.
So you mentioned getting people over the fear of change. And as you know, fear to freedom is the theme of this show. So let's talk about that, because how do you move people over the fear of change? People don't like change, Don. That's not fun, but you are remarkable at doing it. It's certainly it's hard. It's really hard for me to ever envision Don struggling in sales. And we'll talk about his public speaking, because again, the biggest fear for most people is public speaking. And this guy is just dynamic. But specific to fear of change, brother, how do you take somebody and get them over that? What is the process?
Boy, it's what people don't realize, JM, is fear of change. Just in almost any aspect of your life, fear of change is what I call it, the enemy of anything. It's the true enemy of any greatness. And fear of change is so ingrained and all. By the way, it's natural. It's nothing to be concerned about necessarily, because it is natural. See, fear of change exists in us, and has existed in us since day one, since we were created. Let's understand the purpose of fear of change first, before I tell you why it's devastating today. Fear of change keeps us from doing stupid things. See, fear of change affects our survival. So imagine just for a second, Jay, we're not here, but I'm going to take us in a time machine 10,000 years ago. So none of this stuff is here. There's no podcast, there's no electronics, but we're in a time machine, and nobody can see us, but we're observing a family 10,000 years ago. And this family, here's their life right there in beautiful, right near where Folsom Lake is currently. Here's a family of four. There's a husband and a wife, or, a caveman and a cave woman or whatever. They're two little children. And here's what we see. We see them in a nice cave with a nice fire and a nice stream of water with fresh water and fish. And over there are some wild fruits and vegetables. And right over there is some wild buffalo. And when you look at that family's life 10,000 years ago, that's a perfect life. They have everything they need to survive. They've got food, water, shelter, and the ability to procreate. Those are the only four basic needs a human needs. Fear of change exists in us for the simple reason of keeping that family from doing something stupid like moving. Fear of change is a survival mechanism. Look, we got everything we need. You don't need a bigger house or a nicer car. You need food, water, shelter, and ability to procreate. We have all that. So fear of change is compelling. So I look at that family 10,000 years ago. Fear of change is helping them, because they're not doing something stupid like, hey, honey, let's go look for a beach cave. No, stay here. Life is good. Now, what happens to that family is 20 miles upstream, a boulder falls on a hill and blocks that stream, and it goes down the other side of the mountain. And 2 days later, there's no water. What must that family do? Well, they must change. There is no fear of change once the need arises. When the need is greater than the fear of change, we always say yes. Remember that. When the need is greater than the fear of change, it's like a scale. When needs are greater than fear, you always have the courage to change. So what we have to do, rolling this to today's world and the modern world, is people have to understand that the things they want don't motivate action. See, so many people want to make a lot of money and want to have a nice home and want to go on vacations for a month. Wanting something doesn't motivate action. That mechanism inside of us where fear of change exists, that's so powerful and strong, what fear of change needs to battle it and to suppress it is a need. And if you can convert, and this is possible, if you can convert what you think is a want into a need, watch how the universe opens up and everything is exposed on how to get it. You think about these billionaires, they have very nice things, but in their mind, they needed to be billionaires. Something drove them. It wasn't a want, oh gosh, I want to make $5 billion. Something in them where even if the money never materialized, they'd still be as driven because everything to them is turned into a need. In our world, Jay, and we see so many people struggle too because they just exist to want things, and wants, you can want something forever and never take action. When you need it, the universe will bring you miracles. They'll bring you anything to make it happen. So can you convert your wants into needs? Absolutely. That's what all successful people have done. Now, they may not have clearly known that. The reason I can see that from my perspective is because I wanted things and failed for so long. And until I converted those wants into needs, they wouldn't materialize. So, it is absolutely possible for you to have everything you desire in life as long as you can convince yourself, and it's true and believable, that you need it.
Man, I wrote down a couple of those. This is what I love about podcasts. I've spent so much time with Don over especially the last 6 years. I mean, daily we are in conversation, and I learned stuff just hearing that. So thank you. I want to talk about the public speaking, because one of the things I think what I admire so greatly is your ability to tell a story. Even the way you just talked about Folsom Lake and taking people back 10,000, my mind immediately, I'm there. And you have this ability to do that. My question, I guess, because I believe that's one of the reasons you're so dynamic on stage, is your ability to tell stories. There's no question about it. Was that natural? Is that a learned skill? How can others, because if we know that fear of public speaking is literally, for most people, they're more scared of that than dying. And you are so good at it. Can you shed a little light for these folks?
Yeah. Now, again, there were times where I was absolutely petrified and terrified. I remember the first time I was, in an insurance situation where I had to do a group enrollment, and man, I imploded. I mean, it was embarrassing. It was truly, because I thought, how hard could it be? I'd really never been in that experience before. I'd never been in a room full of 100 people to talk to them. So just going there and thinking nothing about it, I was too dumb to know to be afraid of it. But that's what led to the key for me for public speaking. And you're right, it's above death and taxes. Fear of speaking is number one. What I learned, though, and I learned this from I actually went to a speech class called Dale Carnegie. It was a public speaking course. I did that back in the early 80s. But save the money. Let me just tell you what they do. So sorry, Dale Carnegie, but I want to accelerate this for some people. What I was taught was something called incident point benefit. And that when you get in front of a room, you don't lead up to it. What you do is you get up there and you dive right into a story. And you say, 8 years ago. So as soon as those words came out of my mouth, it worked for me. The minute I didn't have to think about and stumble through some weird introduction. The minute I learned how to tell a story in a 2-minute fashion, incident, point, benefit, everything changed because my confidence went through the roof. And when I stood in front of the room, I said, 9 years ago, there I was with a new dad, with a baby, and it immediately worked for me. Now, I was kind of a class clown in school, but I never leveraged that in my adult life. But the ability to start anytime you're in front of a group, even if it's a group of 5 people, with a story, not a joke, but something relevant to what's going to happen there and the message you're trying to get across, it totally put me at ease. And, what Carnegie taught was incident point. So you tell the 90-second story, you tell the point of the story, and you tell the benefit to the listener, what's going to happen as a result. So, there I was, upside down in my vehicle, the point, wear a seatbelt and you will live. So learning that simple little formula got me over the fear, because I always kept going up there and trying to ramp up with somewhere. Thank you so much. It's so nice to be, no, get into the story and you can come back and thank people for being there later. But to put yourself at ease and get the audience totally hooked and engaged, people love stories. People don't forget stories. Think about that, Jim. When's the last time somebody sat you down and told you Little Red Riding Hood? You were a little kid, but everybody remembers the whole message of that story. We forget lists. We forget concepts. That's why people read books and they just don't grab onto it, because there's nothing to bite into it. But if you tie a story to your message in there, people will remember that, because we think in pictures, and stories the stories are using pictures. It paints pictures in your brain. You never forget the pictures in your brain, but you'll always forget a list. You'll always forget a concept. So yeah, learn how to tell a story. Keep it short. The other secret Dale Carnegie had to speeches is have a strong opening, have a strong close, and keep those as close together as possible. And that's the key to good public speaking.
It is the lasting power of Carnegie. I mean, 1936 was How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it's still applicable today. It truly, if in his training. So, but I love that incident, point, benefit. So I have to ask you, because you just always have this cool confidence about you, and it's like, oh, I wrote 60 seconds. Yes, wrote another one. This changes everything. For all I know, you've written others that you haven't told me about. Where does that come from, brother? Is that because you have failed, that there's just no fear any longer? Or do you just hide it better than the rest of us? Because I think everybody kind of wants to float the way you do through life, man. It's like, if you see Don, it just seems like everything's easier. It's kind of like watching Freddie Couples on a golf course, that fluid swing. You're the Freddie Couples of life, bro. You're just kind of floating through life. So where did that come from? Do you know where that came from? And because I want that.
Well, interesting. Something you said. That's why I harken back to I think you were given a talk. I don't know if it was a convention somewhere, but I remember how you had a strong desire to write a book, and it took your son pressuring you, and you had to be accountable to your child, and everything since that. Look at what's happened since that point forward. You had the intention all, but what was the external motivation to do it? And that story stuck with me. I don't like things, I like my house, but my house is very modest for the most part. I drive a pickup truck. I'm not a collector of things. I want to have experiences in life. I think that's what drives these things. And, I wanted to be an author. I grew up, I did want to be a police officer as a young kid because I had a vision that was different, obviously, in today's world. I wanted to be like that Adam 12 that was helping people and, grabbing the cat out of the tree. I had a vision. I wanted to do that. By wanting to have experiences, things just came to me and they come to me, I was in a movie, a pretty big movie, just like accidentally got this little part in a movie, but it was just an experience. It was like, that was a great, I didn't want to be an actor, still don't want to be an actor, but I was able to get into this movie just real by chance. But writing these books comes from my desire I don't want people to have the experience I had between the ages of 22 and 32. I don't want them to have to look at their spouse and say, I don't know how I'm going to make it. I don't know how, I know I made a commitment to you. I made promises to my wife at the time, and I was not keeping those promises. I don't want anybody to ever know what that feels like, because it cost me that marriage. It cost me, being a full-time dad to my daughter at the time. I paid the greatest price for the inability to deliver on my promises. There's nothing more powerful today than saying you're going to do something and doing it. And it's what you and I, JM, talk about all the time when it comes to personal accountability. And, so now when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. But here's the key, folks. It's so easy to be accountable to other people. It's so easy to tell somebody I'm going to do this and they're watching you. Where real accountability for me is when I tell myself I'm going to do something, because it's so easy to lie to yourself. If I treated my friends and family from an accountability perspective like I treat myself, I wouldn't have any friends and family, because that's all internal. If James says, Don, let's go work out at 5 a.m, and for some crazy reason I agree, I wake up not feeling great at 4:30. I'm showing up because I made a promise to JM. But tell yourself you're going to go to the gym at 5. I'm going to start my workout program at 5 tomorrow, and you wake up not feeling it, we'll do it tomorrow or the next day or next week. It's so easy to break promises to yourself and to break your commitments to yourself. If you can fix that, everybody else benefits from that. Because if you can fix the hardest commitment to keep, which is to yourself, then everybody else's commitments become so much easier to keep. And so when I go through that in a training session or a speaking event, JM, it's a real room divider. When I tell people that their word sometimes doesn't mean anything. I mean, they're like, how dare you No, listen. You're more accountable to a stranger you never met than you are to yourself. If you have a meeting with somebody you never met and they're across town, and you will leave your kid's birthday party early to get to that because you made a promise to some stranger. We've all done that. And then the next in line is your friends. If your friends ask you, to help move, you're going to pretty much say, yes, I'll help you move, but the least, besides yourself, the people we treat the worst when it comes to commitment, this is the room divider I'm talking about, is your family. We break promises. How many times I told my child, yes, we'll do this, but something else, some other entity that has nothing to do with my child came in and it pulled me away from the promises I made to them. And we all do that, but I hate it. So if we're the most accountable to strangers, then we have to be least accountable to ourselves. And if we can work on that, if we can work on keeping our word to ourselves, everybody else, including your family and friends, benefit from that.
It truly is. It's fascinating. I hate it as well. And again, I try not to have hate in my life, but I don't understand that. What you just said is so true. And I think why you're probably so good, how fleeting life can be. So you don't do that. Now, it did cost you, like you said, maybe a marriage. So you had to be reminded of that lesson. But isn't that just so interesting? Not in a good way, but we let ourselves down. We let our family down before a stranger. You say it out loud and it's so asinine. It's just ridiculous.
Right.
All right. So one of the things that you and I shared is the love of reading. And I just have to ask you, because I love to hear people's answer, because it's immediate. What is the most impactful book that you've ever read, brother?
To be direct, How to Win Friends and Influence People was one of the most influential books I've ever read. And that was back in the 1980s. Now, think about this. Back then, they used words like businessman. And, women were not in literature back, even in the 80s, when I went through those programs. The number one thing I got out of that book was the first principle of that book, which is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. If you don't have a solution, and if you're not doing it better than anybody else, to shut my mouth and to, say nothing. So I read that book back in the 80s. And if I look today, modern-wise, one of my favorite all-time books besides Let's Go Win is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. My gosh, when I became a sales leader and I read that book, and I'm like, the point that drove home for me there was trust is the foundation of any team. And I looked at companies I've worked with and teams, and I thought there was no trust. There was no trust in leadership. There was no trust in management. There's no trust in the field. And I think it still is very rampant. If you're not paying attention to that, if you don't articulate that out loud, like I remember you talking about this just, weeks ago, that, we need to, as a business organization, we need to work on our trust with the field. And it's like, until somebody says it out loud, people will look for any other reason why things aren't getting done as effective as they could be. If you don't have trust in any of your relationships, you don't have a relationship. And we all excel, we all fail, we all do great things, we all need help. But until that foundation is built, nothing truly can happen past it. And when you talked about it, I don't know, we had a book club. Was that one of in the book club too? Because I've read it many, many times, but I know we love Patrick in other areas too, but that had, to me, the single most impact of my life as a leader of people. So from How to Win Friends and Influence People to the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and everything in between. I mean, I've read them all, Think and Grow Rich, The Millionaire Next Door. I've read them all. They're all great books, but also understand this. I've written books. You've written a great book. I don't know anybody that's gotten rich off those books. Think about this. I know 78 million people have read Think and Grow Rich, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Millionaire Next Door. 78 million people read those books. I've never met one person in all my speaking and all my trainings and all my experiences who've come up to me and said that they're rich because of those books. Think about that, folks. These are what we call the Bibles of building wealth. Why isn't anybody materializing wealth from them? Well, because it goes back to that personal accountability. A book itself, you can't read a book on how to fly. You've got to apply the life skills. You've got to apply the action out here in the real world to make those things happen. People, they read them expecting some weird magic wand is going to wave over their head and it's going to happen. No, those books are what happened to those people, not what's happening to you. Any book is about what happened to those people. If you can't apply it in real life in a practical application, books are worthless. How many people do we know, Jane, that read all those books that struggle every single day? They haven't put it into practical application for them. And, they're great manuals, but they don't change anything unless you're willing to change your habits every single day. And how many times you said that? Oh my gosh, how many times you talked about in front of groups, changing your habits every single day. And it worked. I mean, we're getting there. We're getting there. Maybe not as fast as we want with these people, JM, that we deal with every day, but we'll just keep telling the same story until they get it.
That's a great point. And actually, something I need to probably reinforce more. Hey, here's this book. Now make sure you go apply the lessons of the book, because you're right. If people read it and they'll get inspired, but then they no action. So what? Now I just took away 10 hours of your life. You were inspired, but you did nothing with it. So I'm so excited to ask this question, because I think of all things you are most passionate about is what I'm about to ask. And if anybody follows Don on social media, you'll see it. I mean, it's right out there, and it's the word freedom. And I know you have this amazing relationship with your dad, and you talk about that in your posts and in some of the amazing things he's done. But brother, I just got the simple question is, what does freedom mean to you?
Man, I'll tell you, it means everything, just from right off the top. The ability to have the experiences, the ability to have all the gifts that we have, there truly is nothing more precious. Freedom is the blanket that makes everything that everybody loves about this country or about life. Freedom is the blanket it's wrapped in. There's no other way to do it. I look at how miserable so many places are that don't have the gifts that we have here. And it's sad and it's staggering. I look at my dad. He's 90. He'll be 93 next month. He was in World War II. He was in Korea. And I look at, and what's funny about him? He's never, ever once complained about anything. And what I know about him is he comes out in the morning, we make breakfast when I'm here, and he talks about, I had a dream about the war. I mean, that's 75 years ago. Now, I'm sure he has PTSD. He was on a battleship in the South Pacific, shooting kamikazes out of the sky. I know he has PTSD. He has never once in his entire life complained about anything. He's never complained about anything, not the wars, not, struggling. We didn't grow up wealthy. We were very low income, middle class. That man has never complained about anything. Even though he has a modest lifestyle, he has everything he could possibly ask for. And, I think freedom is also the ability to be grateful for what you have. Have the freedom to be grateful that, you don't need a giant house or nice cars. You can get all that stuff. It's all stuff that you can get. You can work hard like you guys do. Work hard to have it. But freedom is also the ability to love and enjoy what you have now and what you're doing now. And if you're not, freedom allows you to change that. We can do anything we want. That's what freedom allows. We can move to any state we want. We can have any career we want. If you have the drive and desire, freedom is the vehicle that gets you there as well. But like anything else, a vehicle, I got like 2 cars sitting out there. They're just sitting there. Nothing's happened to them. But if they're not being driven and not being driven correctly, they're just giant paperweights. So your freedom sitting dormant inside of you doesn't do anybody any good. Take your freedom, leverage it, and Go do what you want to do and be what you want to be, and have and the things that you need and want. And, take massive action. Again, how many times you said that? Take massive action. It doesn't cost money to take action. It doesn't take material things to take massive action. It's put some intention out there, write it down, break it down to the steps, and go do it and hold yourself accountable to make it happen. Anybody can do it. Anybody. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
Well, for the question of nature versus nurture, if anybody's wondering, it's nurture, man, because you don't complain. And if I'm not mistaken, that's not your biological father by nature, right? But
nope.
The environment has shaped you, and you don't complain about anything. And you could at any point, you could have gone victim role. And I love the way you tied that back. I really do, brother. So thank you for that. What should I have asked you that I didn't? Is there anything that you're like, man, you should have asked me this, brother? I want to share this with the world.
No, I think you really all-encompassing interview. I think I've never gone that broad in any interview I've ever done. That was amazing. I'll tell people this. I've never told that story outside of a group of people in person. So that story that I relayed about my sisters has never been communicated electronically anywhere, not even in writing. And so, James, I appreciate you having the whereabouts and the courage to ask me to tell that story. And by the way, it's not easy to get through. I mean, it's tough for me to get through that story, even after 52 years that happened. And so from that to the books I've read, this was, quite frankly, more in depth than I thought it was going to be. So thank you.
Well, you sharing the story, it's one of those things I'll never forget. And I know exactly where I was. I remember crying right there. And I was just like, how had I not known this? So I thank you for sharing it. Brother, how can our listeners connect with you online?
Please connect with me online. You can go to Facebook and connect with me. I always like to accept good, positive people as friends. You can also connect with me. And, if you want to get a hold of me with anything, just Don Spini at iCloud.com is my email. I get strangers asking me questions all the time. I am very accessible. I'm not some weirdo recluse trying to hide. I like to be out there and help people. Jam, all those trainings, what people don't realize, when I was doing 150 trainings a year for almost 4 years, I never charged a penny to any people that went to those trainings. I did it for free, not because I'm some benevolent guy, but I wanted to get it out there. I wanted to share that and help other people. So, through giving my gifts away for free, I think has made me, more money than anything. So that's a lesson that people can learn from that as well. Give your best stuff away for free and watch what happens in the universe.
Well, you are one of a kind, my brother. I cannot thank you enough for being here, for sharing it, for making our world truly a better place. Truly thank you for being here, man.
Well, I love you. Thank you for having me. I could not be more happy for what's happened with you with all this. I really do love it. I love the content.
You've been a great part of that, brother, and I truly appreciate you. So I love you back just as much. So, guys, please check us out next time as well. Thank Don for being here, and keep transcending in life. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to transcendentlifepodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Transcend in Life podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson, taking you from fear to freedom.